Chapter 291 Poseidon, 3. Team, HH, Thursdays, Yahiko, 8/12. Ted was always confident in his skills. The god he served, Antihero, symbolized power and battle. He was also a king who had never lost before being defeated by Heracles. Ted was the same. He had only lost twice in his life. Once was when he was captured by Lana, who was his former captain. And the other was right before Bentik had mutinied, when they had fought in order to establish a hierarchy. But looking back at it now, Ted felt wronged about both those times. Back then, I wasn't in my best condition. Lana and Bentik's skills were pretty dynamic, and all else aside, back then, I was young. If I fight them now, it would end differently. I've definitely changed since then. Ted was thinking of defeating Bentik and even becoming the leader of Triton. Why wouldn't he be able to do what Bentik did? However, unlike back then with Lana, he didn't have a reason to. So Ted changed his mind. He would show their subordinates just who was most qualified as the leader of Triton. He was given a nice chance. Bentik had fought the Hoarder with all his power, but he couldn't prevail. Bentik was also robbed of Triana, the symbol of Triton. And if he brought back the head of the Hoarder, things would be very different. The gazes of the subordinates who looked at him would change, and he would also kill Jinrang, who looked down on him. If Bentik made a few more mistakes with his right arm gone, at that point, it would become Ted's world. He got there with such great plans for himself. But how? Ted didn't even have the opportunity to use his skills. He was defeated just like that. With Bu's Inferno sight strongly embedded in his soul, taking with him an immense amount of fear. Asterisk. Ted's head crumbled. Brains and flesh flew out, but everything was quickly absorbed by Bathory's vampiric sword. The last of Ted's vestige floated into Yeon-woo's head. Yeon-woo snorted at Ted's thoughts. He was overflowing with greed and overconfidence. He really didn't know his place. Ted thought he could win against Bentik? That's an insult to Bentik. Bentik was an outstanding player that he would have liked to be friends with if they weren't enemies. He was as confident as his skills warranted, and moreover, he didn't hesitate to walk his own path. He was someone to learn from. That was what Yeon-woo thought of Bentik. Also, Bentik probably thought the same of him. They were different but similar. But Ted wanted to be one of them? Bull. He didn't even know the power of his enemies and died because he ran headfirst into the situation. And he wanted to do what? Yeon-woo almost felt bad for Antihero, who was about to have some of his holy power stolen. No. Didn't Antihero die because he was arrogant and ended up being killed by Heracles? I guess the apostle was just taking after the god. Poseidon is furious. Poseidon is furious. Yeon-woo laughed at Poseidon's response, which he was used to now, and completed his absorption. Antihero's holy power flowed into his body. Divine blessings spun inside of him, and when he absorbed holy power, the blessings were amplified. The formation of his cells changed slightly, and he could feel his body becoming firmer. But compared to the arm of Poseidon's apostle, it's a shame. The amount of holy power was similar to when he absorbed Bentik's right arm. It wasn't that Antihero lacked holy power, it was that Poseidon just had a lot. You have completed 20% of the sudden quest, Sito's resentment. A message saying he was progressing through the quest that Sito gave him kindly popped up. Thanks to that, the seawater charm around his neck emitted a blue light, and a small amount of holy power was restored. Is it telling me to work harder? And on one hand, he was interested in Bu, who had instantly dominated an apostle. Even though he had the help of Shannon, Han Ryeong, and other monster portents, the reason why Yeon-woo was able to catch Ted without too much trouble was because of Bu's abilities. Bu is definitely that person. Yeon-woo grinned and looked down the cliff again. A burning port could be seen. There were also players who were shocked by Ted's death. Their pale faces contrasted the red fire. Take care of the rest. The monster portents moved again. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The news that Tritons poured on the 30th floor was completely blown away, spread throughout the tower like wildfire. When the news that one of the commanders of Triton, Ted, died without being able to do much, everyone was surprised. One person was behind it all. The Hoarder. The famous player, who was now better known by his nickname than the name Kane, repeated what he did on the 28th floor on the 30th floor. The Hoarder was considered a super rookie who might have been the next person to reach the level of a king. Moreover, Triton was one of the new emerging clans who could potentially take the spots of the 8 large clans. The ruler King Bentik, apostle of Poseidon, was also there. Of course, people's attention would be on this clash. People thought this was a chance to see the Hoarder's real skills, which were shrouded by rumors, and confirm the hidden forces of Triton. Also, other clans who were competing with Triton considered it a good opportunity to decrease their numbers and began to move busily. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. All trials have ended. Would you like to register your name in the Hall of Fame? The trial ended when the small amount of soul poison left in his body was digested. However, he didn't plan on heading up to the 31st floor yet. He moved the message window aside and silently trod on. He was in a field that was lying bare in the hot sun. At night, sharp winds blew. Yeon-woo extended his magic armor into a robe, covering his head with the hood, and tracked where Bentik was. There wasn't that much distance between them anymore. Why hasn't he shown up yet? Yeon-woo had collided with Triton's forces multiple times while passing through the stages. Entire ports and fleets had been blown away, so the financial damage they suffered was probably immense. Also, Ted's death was a loss of manpower for them. Triton and Yeon-woo had gone beyond a point of no return. A war with their lives at stake had begun. Unlike Yeon-woo's expectations, which was that Bentik would arrive soon, Bentik hadn't shown himself once. Is he not recovered yet? But by now, his holy power should be recovered. Actually, Yeon-woo was more injured than Bentik. He could heal himself again with regeneration, but the same went for Bentik. The frightening regeneration power that brought back his entire body wouldn't go anywhere. No, even with that aside, considering Bentik's personality, he should have come by now. He wasn't someone to avoid a challenge just because his injuries were severe. Triton must have thought that they would really be destroyed at this rate because the frequency of their attacks decreased, and they didn't show themselves since the day before yesterday. Did something happen? Just when Yeon-woo was considering whether he should invade Triton's base, Shannon suddenly called for him. Look, Master! He seemed strangely excited. What? You know. Shannon was speaking in a high-pitched voice. It was uncomfortable to listen to. Yeon-woo narrowed his eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. Nah. Not between us. Yeon-woo's face crumpled more. Master, a servant must read their master's intentions even if they aren't ordered. If you feel uncomfortable, sir, what about giving it to me? This time, Han Ryeong appeared next to Yeon-woo and whispered. Shannon shouted. Shannon and Han Ryeong had a fight of wits. It was because of Ted's soul that was still in his collection. Yeon-woo clicked his tongue. The level of an apostle's soul was bound to have a high level. Hey! That's mine. That's for Master to decide. Yeon-woo glanced up at the sky. He could see Rebecca lightly floating around in her spirit form. From some time ago, Rebecca didn't say anything about wanting to become a human again. She changed to her spirit form from time to time and just spun around Yeon-woo. When Yeon-woo spoke to her, she would only reply with a short answer. They didn't have to communicate because they were connected, and he didn't care too much, but Rebecca wasn't even looking at him, like it didn't matter to her. She was different from Boo, who faithfully followed Yeon-woo. After we get all of Triton. Not now. Humph. If you say so, Master. Shannon and Han Ryong didn't speak about the soul any further. They that Yeon-woo never changed his mind. Also, they needed to have an extra soul in case of emergency. I should talk to Rebecca later. When Yeon-woo looked away from Rebecca, he suddenly sensed something with his extrasensory perception. They were a small group of soldiers in the oasis. Yeon-woo thought it was Triton and put his hand on the magic bayonet, but he realized that it wasn't them soon enough. They were stronger than them. And he was familiar with them as well. The Fantasy Regiment. To be exact, it was the second squad, the Illusion Knightage, who had been useful in putting distance between him and Waltz's primeval body. Yeon-woo's shadow wavered. The monster portents were ready to move. The reason that they didn't was because the Fantasy Regiment didn't have any murderous intent towards him. Rather, they were waiting gladly for Yeon-woo. When Yeon-woo reached the oasis, they all stood up. They were all wearing shining silver armor that must have been difficult to wear in the scorching heat, and there were long capes on their bodies. Nice to meet you, Kane. I'm Kreutz of the Illusion Knightage. Kreutz stepped up and held his hand out. He looked happy to see Yeon-woo. Yeon-woo silently looked at the hand and replied without a gesture. What are you guys doing here? Kreutz must have felt awkward because he rubbed his right hand with his left hand, but the smile didn't leave his face. He spoke with a bright face that looked sculpted by a god. We've been waiting for you. Me? Indeed. Actually, I wanted to speak with you at the River of Souls, but the timing wasn't right. It was such a shame. I looked everywhere for you again, and I was able to find you with much difficulty. It's such a relief that I did end up meeting you. Yeon-woo frowned. Another set of pupils opened within his eyes. It was draconic eyes. It's the truth. Still, he didn't let his guard down. Why were you looking for me? For revenge. Ah, I'll apologize on behalf of the Fantasy Regiment for what the 92nd Squad did. Kreutz bowed his head in an elegant manner to apologize. The other players behind him also bowed their heads. They didn't seem to have any tricks up their sleeves. Truth. Yeon-woo narrowed his eyes even more. Kreutz definitely wasn't lying. The same went for the other players. He couldn't see any enmity. They looked to be apologetic and well-intentioned. However, Yeon-woo was suspicious of their goodwill because he didn't think there was any reason for it. Why did you look for me? Kreutz lifted his bowed head and spoke again. Our regiment leader longs to meet you. Also, we even have orders to help you no matter what if you are in danger. What was he talking about? Who is your regiment leader? He said that you're his dear old friend. Chapter 292 Poseidon, 4. Friend. He was even more confused. Yeon-woo had spent some time in the tower now, but he could still count all the close relationships he made on one hand. And if they were his friend? Is it Khan or Doyle? The Fantasy Regiment, one of the 4 new emerging clans, was large, and many things were known about its members. However, there was nearly no information about the first squad, which commanded them all. It was only known that some players had exuded absolute charisma and convinced 10 rankers to be on their side, and the players who were beneath them made up today's Fantasy Regiment. There were only guesses about the leader of the Fantasy Regiment. No one knew the truth. Such a concealed person knew him? There were only 2 people who popped up in his head. Khan and Doyle. He had failed every time he tried to look for them or hear news about them. Yeon-woo sometimes wondered if they were dead or if they had retired and returned to their home planet. If they were alive, they should have left traces somewhere, but he couldn't find anything at all. But if one of the 2 was the leader of the Fantasy Regiment? It's possible. But is it really? Could the 2 of them become that much stronger in that short amount of time? The 12 clan leaders of the Fantasy Regiment were all famous for being rankers. A few of them were high rankers who climbed past the 70th floor. To be the leader of those players, you would have to have the skills as well as the charisma that equaled or surpassed theirs. In the tower, the magic that pulled people towards an individual was how great their martial might was. However, even if Khan and Doyle were strong, it was hard to imagine that they had grown that much in such a short amount of time. Yeon-woo, who had tips and information from his brother, was barely a high ranker now. But if Khan and Doyle had become that powerful in that amount of time, there's no way rumors wouldn't have spread. Of course, it wasn't like it was completely impossible. If the chosen clan leader had a reputation or something that was enough to make up for their lack of skills. And if that was what pulled people towards them, it might be possible. I don't know about Doyle, but maybe Khan. Doyle was smart but emotional. He was likable, but it was hard for him to receive absolute loyalty. However, Khan was different. The guy who Yeon-woo thought was a complete psycho seemed emotional, but he was actually quite logical. He was decisive and had the magic of pulling people in. If he had the chance, he could definitely create a mighty force. Whoever it was, Yeon-woo couldn't figure it out, so he asked Kreutz. Who is the regiment leader? However, Kreutz shook his head. Sorry. I can't tell you that here. He's the target of quite a few people. I have to uphold the rules for the sake of his safety. Yeon-woo narrowed his eyes. Are you telling me to go see someone I don't know? Does that make sense to you? Talking about that friend who's so difficult to gauge? What do you want me to think? I'll apologize again, but we cannot tell you no matter how many times you ask. What we can tell you is to trust the namesake of the fantasy regiment and to trust me. Kreutz thumped his chest with his fist as if he really wanted Yeon-woo to trust him. If it's still hard to believe, the regiment leader has sent a message that he will be out of closed training soon, so just until he comes, I'd like to accompany you. The regiment leader can meet up with us later. Of course, it will be that much of an undertaking. Kreutz seemed to be very loyal to the regiment leader. He was working hard to keep the leader from being exposed to the public while also arranging a meeting between them. Yeon-woo could see him being careful in case he rejected the offer. Usually, in these cases, it was the opposite side who would have the upper hand over Yeon-woo. I see, so that's how much he doesn't want to disobey the leader's orders. From what Yeon-woo saw, Kreutz definitely wasn't someone who should have been under anyone. Based on the way he carried himself and the elegant aura around him, his ability as a leader was outstanding. It was a completely different style from Bentik, but it was similar in many ways as well. More than anything, his strength wasn't lacking compared to Yeon-woo or Bentik. Someone who was able to have the absolute loyalty of such a person. Yeon-woo became curious about the regiment leader. However, he couldn't simply follow the directions of someone he didn't know just because he was curious. His draconic eyes showed him that there weren't any lies, but there were still some suspicious parts. It would be more convincing if you get rid of the suspicious people over there. Yeon-woo pointed at the gazes he felt following him since fighting Triton. There were all kinds of gazes. Their appearances and skills all varied. It meant that it wasn't from just one place, but there were many who were following him. Although they didn't know they had been detected. Yeon-woo just pretended that he didn't see them. However, he clearly identified where they were. It was to kill them all with his shadows in case something happened. Kreutz tilted his head, not knowing what Yeon-woo was trying to say, and burst out laughing after his subordinate whispered something in his ear. Those are 2 of the 6 new stars. It would be stranger if you didn't attract their attention. He was hearing the word for the first time. 6 new stars? Who are they? You don't know. Kreutz reacted like it was strange. Explain. I guess. If you focused on individual training and climbing the floors, you might not know. It's a relatively new name. But it's nice to check up on the changes of the tower occasionally. Yeon-woo nodded without saying anything. He knew that he didn't know a lot about the news in the tower. In the One-Horned tribe, he had pretty much only done closed training, and in the tower, he was so focused on climbing the floors that he didn't have time to check. The 6 new stars are super rookies like you who caused uproars after entering the tower. Rookies. Correct. Kreutz's explanation was simple. After the somewhat quiet destruction of Walpurgis-Nacht because of the war between the One-Horned Tribe and Red Dragon, countless emerging forces were rising. New skilled people appeared and showed off their talents. The 6 new stars was a name for those at the very top of them. The Hoarder, Kane. Magic Beauty, Edora. The Regiment Leader. The Ruler King Bentik. Dr. Doom, Renal. Faceless. Along with the clan leaders of the 4 new emerging clans, Yu and the daughter of the One-Horned Tribe's Cheongram family was added. They were called candidates for the next 9 kings and symbolized the change in generation. Of course, Dr. Doom and Faceless are quite old to be included in the new wave. But there's no denying that they can challenge the 9 kings. Yeon-woo seemed a bit surprised after hearing all the names. Edora. The 4 new emerging clan leaders were obvious because they were the heads of their respective clans. And he had also shown his abilities in the Walpurgis-Nacht attack, so there weren't many who doubted his skills anymore. However, he didn't know that Edora would be a part of this, so he was a bit surprised. Ah, your friend, Magic Beauty, is currently clearing the 42nd floor. She's surprising everyone with her quick pace. Most people are thinking that she'll quickly get the qualification of a ranker on the 50th floor. He heard that she was on the 35th floor when he left the village. It seemed like she had climbed 7 more floors during that time. Considering how the levels became more difficult at higher floors, Edora's clear pace was impossibly fast. She climbed the 42nd floor faster than she climbed the 35th floor. A player whose pace increased the higher they went. Also, she was the daughter of the one everyone considered the strongest in the tower, the Martial King. Of course people would be paying attention. Additionally, from what Kreutz said, she always had an expressionless face, like a doll. She didn't work with anyone else, and if she thought someone approached her to use her, she cut them down mercilessly. There were even a few rankers among them, so no one was able to challenge her easily. The reason why she had the nickname Magic Beauty was because of her cold personality and mannerisms. She even has a few followers because they fell in love with that side of her. There are some who call themselves Magic Beauty Star. The nickname is so funny that it's not. Although, she doesn't seem to care. Magic Beauty Star was large enough to be counted as an addition to the 4 new emerging clans if they became organized. Yeon-woo silently nodded, thinking. Fanti must be painfully jealous if he knows. Fanti was easily jealous, so he would probably be envious of his little sister's fame. Of course, Yeon-woo wasn't saying it was bad. He would probably be more motivated and work harder. On one hand, he was also grateful towards Edora. Edora didn't like revealing her abilities. It wasn't like she tried to hide them, but she didn't like to show off. The reason that she was causing such an uproar was probably because of Yeon-woo's request. I want you to become stronger. These words had motivated Fanti to go into closed training, and they had motivated Edora to climb as well. Anyways, that's the current situation. The 8 large clans are busy ripping each other apart on the higher floors, trying to claim Red Dragon's inheritance, and on the lower floors, the 4 emerging clans and the 6 new stars are showing their power. Also, Kreutz put emphasis on his words. The one at the very top is you, Kane. Yeon-woo didn't say anything for a moment and looked back. The countless eyes that were still watching him from far away. They were probably from the 4 clans, skilled players equal to them, or subordinates of the 8 large clans. Whoever they were, it meant that the spotlight of the tower was on him. Yeon-woo realized that his war with Triton had a bigger impact than he thought. But it must be uncomfortable and annoying to have all those eyes following you. You have to focus on the war with Triton, but you don't know how they might bother you. Most of them are hoping you decrease Triton's numbers or destroy them completely. Yeon-woo looked back at Kreutz again. So are you telling me to receive your protection if I don't want to be bothered? If you don't like how that's phrased, what about working together? Or you can say that you hired us. We'll help you meet with the regiment leader, and you can focus on the war with Triton without being interrupted. I can protect myself. Are you saying that we'd only get in the way? Then I'll have the knightage move back. Instead, it's fine even just by myself, so allow me to follow you quietly. Yeon-woo scoffed in disbelief. It seemed like Kreutz was planning on following him no matter what he said. For a moment, he thought of chasing him away by fighting him, but then he would have to fight all of the illusion knights, and Kreutz's skills were on par with Bentik's, so it was possible that the damage on his side would be greater, so he shut down those thoughts. There was nothing he could earn from fighting with the illusion knightage. He didn't need to turn people who had good intentions towards him into his enemies, and right now, he had to concentrate on the war with Triton. He had to get Bentik somehow. Eventually, Yeon-woo waved his hand. Fine, do whatever you want. But not the knightage. They're annoying. Understood. Kreutz nodded, looking at the illusion knightage. Then, they all began to scatter, putting distance between them. It was to protect them from ranged attacks and prevent outside intervention. The players who had been trying to approach Yeon-woo began to move further away. The illusion knightage was one of the most powerful groups within the fantasy regiment. Of course they wouldn't want to fight them. However, there were still gazes that didn't move away. They were all holding their auras in, but their empty presence could be felt nevertheless. They were people who didn't fall short of Kreutz or people who could defeat him. Yeon-woo thought it might be the other 5 new stars or a second party. There are a lot of strong people within the tower, indeed. Yeon-woo's 2 eyes became deep. Also, I don't plan on working with you. If you want to follow me, you're on your own. Don't worry. Yeon-woo scoffed. You should think before you answer. What? Swag. Kreutz was about to ask what he meant, but Yeon-woo suddenly spread his wings of fire apart and kicked off from the ground. He used blink and wind path. In the blink of an eye, he left the oasis. Kreutz was flustered. The hoarder's movement abilities were already well known. It wasn't easy to follow Yeon-woo with the heavy armor he had on. It seemed like he would have to run furiously under the scorching sun. He sighed and whistled with his thumb and middle finger in his mouth. Fweet. Just then, a 3-meter-long wyvern came flying over to him. It was the means of transportation of the illusion knightage and their pride, the flying dragon. Kreutz got on the wyvern easily and pulled at the leash around its neck. He would have to fly for a while to catch up to Yeon-woo. ******. Wait. Hey. That's not fair. We've been moving comfortably so far. We'll have to run like hell now. Ta ha ha ha. I bet this will be fun too. The player confirmed that Yeon-woo and the illusion knightage were moving and slowly stood up. The player's entire body was covered in white bandages like a mummy, and it was hard to tell their gender or age. Under the bandages, different voices were talking to each other. It was like there were multiple people in a single body. The famous player who had never shown his face to the world, the unidentifiable player, faceless, lightly hit the ground. ******. We're moving. At the words of the robed black magician, the other magicians who followed him all stood up from their spots. It was the clan of Dr. Doom and his disciples, Necropolis. They disappeared through a red portal on the ground. All the life from where they had been was sucked up, and everything dried up and died. Chapter 293 Poseidon, 5. I heard the hoarder arrived right under our noses. What are you planning to do now? I don't think our defense will work. Elaine smiled faintly and looked at Jinrang. Jinrang thought this as he looked at her. Crazy bee. Her little twin brother had died. And his enemy was coming. However, she just looked amused, not mad in the slightest. He had felt this before, but Elaine had a few screws loose. She had been like this many times in the past. Even when they were under Lana, he never knew what she was thinking. It wasn't like she had deep thoughts or schemes. In any situation, she always chose the more amusing path. She was really crazed for excitement. When they caused the coup in the past, she joined hands with Triton, thinking that it would be more fun than being with Lana. Her motive was more nonsensical than Ted's plan to steal Bentik's spot after he joined. And it seemed like she still had the same crazy mindset. It was a way of thinking that the logical Jinrang didn't even want to try to understand or have close to him. But what could he do? He had expected Ted to attack Yeon-woo and run away, but Ted had been killed so futilely. Was there something the hoarder has been hiding all this time? But it was impossible. He had hid some of his powers on the complex battlefield with Bentik, Waltz's primeval body, Duke Ardbad, the fantasy regiment. Even though the hoarder was a mysterious monster, this was hard to understand with logic. Or did he become stronger during that short time since the fight? No way. However, Jinrang thought that it was the former that made more sense than the latter. And if the former was the truth, we have to kill him using any means possible this time. The growth rate of the hoarder was threatening enough to make the people looking at him shiver. If he became that much stronger with just one fight, it meant that his talent was on a different level from the beginning. The longer such a dangerous variable was left alone, the more dangerous it was to the clan. However, the problem was that it's not easy to stop him. Jinrang pressed his throbbing temples and took a look behind him. The large iron door was shut tightly. The door was decorated with the image of a tornado-inducing trident and all kinds of monsters, and it demonstrated Poseidon's might. That iron door had been shut for several days. So, when's Captain coming out? Jinrang shook his head. I don't know. What are you talking about? Exactly what I said. I thought it would end in a few days. But I think his recovery is slower than expected. So you weren't able to tell him about the outside situation either? Jinrang nodded his head silently. Elaine had a disbelieving face and snorted. It's hard to find such a person dedicated to Captain like you. Right? If you don't want to bother him, I'll tell him. Elaine swept past Jinrang and approached the iron door. Jinrang didn't stop her. He knew that it was a futile attempt anyway. And like he expected, Elaine wasn't able to approach the iron door. Beyond the iron door, something large was bundled up. It was a sticky but condensed power. Something incredible that dominated its surroundings and made you feel like you had to bow was squirming. It seemed like a monster but also like the god they served. The closer she approached the iron door, the greater the unidentifiable power became, and Elaine had to pause and look at Jinrang. She felt anxious, like she was going to have everything she had stolen from her. Her face that always had a faint look was filled with shock for the first time. So that crazy bee could make that face too. Jinrang snorted. It's clear Captain is preparing for something. He might be communicating with Poseidon right now. Communicating? This is communicating. Anyways, until Captain comes out of his own volition, it's forbidden to approach the door. No, I suggest that you don't. Unless you want to be drained of all your holy power. Elaine moved away a few steps from the door and caught her breath. Although her face was filled with shock, her eyes were filled with glee. Jinrang felt like crying seeing her. Then? What about those trespassers? You want to stop them ourselves? I don't think it's just the hoarder that's the problem anymore. She was talking about the rat-like bastards who were following Yeon-woo. Kreutz, Faceless, and Dr. Doom. They were all bastards she wanted to get rid of at once. But if used right, this could be a chance to get rid of all the nuisances bothering Triton. You and I have to get rid of them. However we can. Are you saying you need my hand? Right now, I'll take anyone's help. Sheesh, you can be honest at times like this. The hand that you're trying to hold isn't just anyone's hand. Above Elaine's eyes, tens of new eyes opened. The multiple eyes that caused anyone who looked at them to be disgusted reflected Jinrang's face. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Yeon-woo lifted his head. Far away, he could see a colossal castle built along the seashore. The castle looked like many different things. It looked like ruins, a fortress, or even a temple. However, Yeon-woo could feel it. Bentik was there. With something huge. What is he doing? For some time now, he couldn't connect with the monster portents in his shadow. It wasn't that Bentik had found them and gotten rid of them. The connection was just naturally cut off. Like it was blocked by something in the middle. He couldn't feel beyond it. Yeon-woo felt like he knew what it was. A god's barrier. The land that gods and demons lived in to use their power properly was called Holy Land or Holy Territory. A god's barrier was the fence around it. It was similar to what he felt in the Temple of the Three Norns on the 16th floor. Especially when the goddess word descended. Did Poseidon come down? But Yeon-woo thought something was weird. Shut up. Is it my fault that this happened? It's all your fault for not being able to predict this when you're a god. Because of my dirty-tempered god who can't do anything. I showed a bad side of myself. Let's start again. Bentik was a human who even cursed the god he served if things didn't go his way. That was how confident he was of himself, so it was strange that he would have had Poseidon descend. No. It's not from Poseidon descending. It's something similar yet different. Yeon-woo shook his head. If it was a simple descent, he would have felt Poseidon's holy power strongly, but the storm inside that castle was similar yet different. But I'm here, so there's nothing I can do but face it. Yeon-woo organized his thoughts and slowly began to climb up the slope. He could feel the presences following him start to move busily. It seemed like after Yeon-woo officially faced off against Triton, they would join in and take the leftovers. However, it didn't matter to him. Finishing the fight with Bentik and taking Poseidon's holy power as a result of that. As long as that wasn't interrupted, he didn't care about what the other people did. No, they could just cause confusion, so it might have been a good stroke of luck for him. They could attack him, but he had shaken off Waltz's primeval body, so why wouldn't he be able to get away from them? Also, like Kreutz and the Illusion Knightage had promised, they were following him at some distance. Kreutz was relatively closer, but as he promised, he wasn't interfering. Yeon-woo activated his magic circuit as he approached the castle. His 360 cores circulated, and the Philosopher's Stone supplied magic power to him continuously. His senses were worked up, and his muscles tensed up. Draconic eyes and extrasensory perception opened, and he read the flow around the castle. It was to begin the attack right away if something happened. Triton's attacks could have begun at any moment. They hadn't shown themselves for some time, so he guessed that all their forces were inside the tower. However, what? Yeon-woo couldn't feel anything while he approached the castle. Nothing was there. There was nothing in the center of the castle, where he had expected some surprise attacks. There weren't any soldiers along the walls, who should have been ready to fight. No matter how much he looked around with his draconic eyes and extrasensory perception, he couldn't feel anything. It was the same when he reached the castle. Was it really just ruins? An ominous feeling exuded from the ruins with the wide-open castle doors, as if it was ushering him in. He had been expecting an intense fight, and he was flabbergasted. It was anticlimactic, but he didn't let his guard down. Not too long after he passed through the castle doors, he saw a man on a rock waiting for him. It was a face that Yeon-woo had seen before. The player was the one who saved Bentik from Duke Ardbad. Jinrang. He was Bentik's subordinate from the time when they were under Lana. Orion's apostle slowly stood up from the rock as soon as he saw Yeon-woo. So you came all the way here. I desperately hoped you would just pass us by. Jinrang had a tired face. After Bentik entered his room to recover, he had been busy taking care of Bentik's work in addition to his own. It wasn't just Yeon-woo who put them in a difficult situation. There were the three clans following Yeon-woo that slowly nibbled at Triton's territory. The Fantasy Regiment, Necropolis, and Faceless Chest of Souls. All of them had targeted Triton officially and allied themselves, putting pressure on Triton, so there weren't just one or two things Jinrang had to take care of. That was also the reason why Yeon-woo hadn't been attacked for some time. If they kept on being attacked from all sides like this, even their base was in danger. So there was a need to focus all their forces on one spot. I'm requesting this favor from you. Do you have any inclination to stop the fight here? Jinrang was being genuine. He wanted to prevent any fighting from happening if he could. With Yeon-woo gone, there were so many things that Triton would be able to do. That was how much of a difficult opponent Yeon-woo was. It was unbelievable for Yeon-woo. You're the ones who started it. I'll apologize however many times you want me to for that. We'll also compensate you. Just name the price. Jinrang's eyes shined. Yeon-woo could read the desperation in them. He unintentionally laughed. And if I want Bentik's head? Jinrang's face hardened. So you don't plan on backing off until the end? I can't do that. Even if I end it here, do you think Bentik will simply agree to that? Jinrang wasn't able to say anything. Even if I accept that offer, he'll be after me sometime in the future anyway. The one that's aiming for me isn't Bentik but Poseidon, to be exact. As his servants, I don't think you'll be able to ignore his orders. Jinrang glared at Yeon-woo and sighed. That's correct. We are the ones chosen by Poseidon. Technically, we're like his priests who listen to him. We'll have to clash with you someday. I don't like to leave things unfinished like that. Then I suppose it can't be helped. Yaa. Jinrang raised his hands behind his back and pulled out a pair of twin swords. Kashing. The sharp sound of metal rang out, and his aura began to whirl. It was incomparable to Ted's. We have to clench our teeth and fight, to Nov, L, by, N, com. As soon as he finished, the ground shook, and it became noisy behind him. Quang! What's this? It became annoying. Tens of monsters popped out from where the watching players were and began their sudden attack. Triton's players were on the backs of the monsters. The hidden forces were all there. Monster chaos. The authority of Charybdis, the god that Elaine served. Charybdis was born from Poseidon and Gaia. She had the power of sea and land, and being born as a horrid monster, she naturally became the king of all monsters. Of course the power to rule all those monsters would come with it. Necropolis and the Chest of Souls didn't expect to be attacked because they just planned on watching, and they quickly got into formation. However, those who couldn't were instantly crushed by the monsters or became their prey. At the same time, the air around Yeon-woo swirled and placed him in a completely different location. And in front of him, instead of Jinrang, there was a monster snake that was tens of meters long running at him with its mouth wide open. Chapter 294 Poseidon, 6. Yeon-woo instinctively pulled out Vigrid from subspace and raised it. Clang! The venomous fang of the monster snake dangerously stopped right above Yeon-woo's head. It struggled to swallow Yeon-woo, but Yeon-woo's firm demonic dragonic body didn't budge. Still, the strength of the monster snake wasn't to be laughed at. If it was a normal monster, its head would have been cut off, but it was strong enough to endure against Vigrid's attack. Ching! Vigrid trembled. Yeon-woo was able to know the identity of the snake with his draconic eyes. Elaine. Another executive of Triton. It was Elaine's transformed form. Transformation monster. The god Charybdis was an outstanding monster, so not only could her apostle Elaine have the authority of ruling monsters, she also had the authority to change into Charybdis's shedding. However, Elaine didn't like transforming into a monster. The fact that she had turned into this form meant one thing. Are you planning on getting rid of me first? That's right. The answer to Yeon-woo's murmur to himself came from behind him. Jinrang had appeared with still eyes. So please die here, hoarder. Swag. The twin swords in Jinrang's hands were swung. Sturdy aura came from the blades and let out a brilliant light. True tornado. It was a skill that attacked with the force of a tornado each time he swung his swords. Right before his blade slid across Yeon-woo's back, Yeon-woo circulated his magic circuit. The Philosopher's Stone that had been waiting was heated, and his wings of fire spread apart. Kwang! A powerful heat expanded and flicked Jinrang away. Jinrang was pushed away, leaving a deep mark in the ground. He looked at Yeon-woo with his eyes wide open. His arms were simmering. Above his burnt black skin, white steam was wafting up, causing him intense pain. He was able to restore his body with holy power, but he couldn't believe that his body, which received the grace of the ocean, could be hurt like this from heat. His shock didn't end there. Yeon-woo wrapped the fire around his body and turned his body to the side. The grid, which was shining white, turned black and caused an explosion. Wave of fire. An explosion that couldn't be compared to before swept Elaine and Jinrang instantaneously. It filled their surroundings. Kwa kwa kwang. The barrier surrounding the air couldn't endure the expansion of heat and was destroyed. The heat wave drew a whirlwind outside of the barrier and soared up into the sky. The atmosphere was ripped apart. Jinrang rolled on the floor for a while after being blown away. He used his sword as a cane to force himself up, but when he did, his eyes shook. How can this? His plan was simple. While the Chest of Souls and Necropolis were busy from the sudden attack of the monsters, he and Elaine would take care of Yeon-woo and then the rest of them. He didn't think it would be hard. This place was Poseidon's holy territory, with his direct blessing, and if they fought from this closed space, he thought they definitely had a chance. For the other forces, they could just hang on until Bentik opened the iron door and came out. However, Jinrang belatedly realized that his judgment was wrong. Yeon-woo wasn't simply someone Elaine and he could work together to catch. So, he was a monstrous guy who becomes stronger with every battle. Was he hiding his abilities, or was he just stronger? The latter was just proved. Yeon-woo used the same ability that he used when he was fighting with Bentik. No. Or maybe it was both of them. However, Jinrang had to think again. Two inferno sights were floating above Yeon-woo's head like will-o'-the-wisps. No, they were watching him. It sent shivers down Jinrang's back. What was that? That was all Jinrang could think of. His head became blank just by looking at it. Was this what it meant for your heart to beat out of your chest? He felt like he was hanging on the edge of a cliff. The moment he saw it, he realized. Up.dfrm novel b, I, n.c, o, m. Those two eyes were nothing compared to its owner. What he had thought about a separate space being above Yeon-woo's head was wrong. Yeon-woo was hiding something, an even bigger card up his sleeve. That wasn't the only problem. No. D, don't come here. Elaine, who had returned to her human form, was filled with fear. She had fallen on her bottom, and she was moving back while kicking her feet against the ground. Her clothes were drenched with sweat, and the fear on her charred face was apparent to see. The person who had just snickered when her little brother was dead, someone who always thought about how to feel exhilarated. It was the first time Jinrang saw her like that. That was how scared Elaine was of Boo's eyes. Much more than what Ted had felt. People saw as much as they knew. As the king of monsters, she could see exactly how powerful Boo was and how high he towered above them. To people like her, Boo was an absolute being who couldn't be surpassed. Even if Elaine was a ranker and confident in her strength, there were limits that she couldn't surpass because of the difference in properties. Boo was someone beyond those limits. No, he was way above them, he was someone she couldn't even look at. It was impossible that she was confronting him like this right now. The blessing of Charybdis that always protected her had become faint and didn't return. You recognized me? His eyes narrowed as he spoke so only Elaine could hear him. He whispered quietly, but it felt like a shout in Elaine's head. Her skull felt like it was tightening, and her insides tossed. Then ... What came after made Elaine's heart beat wildly. Just when an invisible hand was about to tighten around Elaine's neck and soul from the shadow. 1. Air swished from behind her, and her neck was cut by a sword. Elaine's head dropped to the ground, her face still filled with shock. Under the fountain of blood, there was an unidentified person moving quickly. They were wrapped with bandages, so it was hard to tell their age or gender. Faceless. One of the 6 new stars and the clan leader of the Chest of Souls. The players' vocal cords were cut, so they came forward with the sound of nails on a chalkboard. As soon as Elaine and Charybdis's channeling was cut off and the monsters were confused, he quickly got rid of them and entered the battlefield. Faceless thought it was weird to stay watching the situation with how things were going, so Faceless entered the castle, cutting Elaine's head off at once. Although his home was being invaded like this, Bentik still wasn't appearing. This meant one thing. Bentik's injuries from the battle with the Hoarder were still not recovered. You dare! Bu was furious. His prey was taken from right under his nose. It wasn't a normal prey. It was prey filled with divine blessings that his great master was supposed to absorb. But he had missed it like this. He was able to hide the soul in the shadows using the monster portents, but he couldn't add it to the collection. He had lost the soul of an apostle so uselessly. So Bu activated magic to catch Faceless. The land Faceless was stepping on suddenly dropped, and shadow tentacles wrapped around it. Faceless' face hardened. Their face was covered from the bandages, so it couldn't be seen, but for someone who was about to head straight into Bentik's room, the tentacles got in the way. The large eyes above Yeon-woo were horrifying, but that was it. Only Jinrang and Elaine felt the difference in their levels. Faceless wasn't affected by it. Get out of the way, I. Faceless twisted their body in the direction they were running. As Faceless did, bandages unwrapped from the arm and sliced the shadows. The bandages were as flexible as a whip and sometimes as hard as a blade as it blocked each of Bu's attacks. Aura was in the bandages. Although it was moving oddly, it was all smoothly controlled. Kwang! A large ball of fire fell from the sky. But under this sky, bandages unwrapped from their foot and made a round, reflective form. Faceless cut off the burnt bandages and unleashed new bandages, changing direction. Faceless was going to get rid of Bu first because he was a nuisance. Of course, Faceless' goal was Yeon-woo. Swag! And above their heads, a red portal opened, and a middle-aged man descended. It was hard to see because his robe covered his face, but there were deep dark circles under his eyes. I announce bad fate for all of you. Dr. Doom, Ranel, spoke those creepy words and flicked his fingers. As he did, countless magic circles were created in the air. Random magic circle release. Dr. Doom could use a new form of magic that didn't require him to store or memorize anything beforehand. He was the only player who could do this. In a way, it was similar to Jeong-woo Cha Jeong-woo's random shooting. Different magic circles all shot out magic at the same time. Kwang. What Dr. Doom was aiming for was everyone here. Yeon-woo, Faceless, Jinrang, and the hidden Bentik. They were all in one place, so he thought he would be able to gain something if he struck them randomly. In that situation, Kreutz interfered. He promised not to interfere with what Yeon-woo did, but he couldn't let this go because of the clan leader's orders to protect him. As he jumped off the flying dragon, he struck his sword down towards Dr. Doom. The holy sword Zulfikar emanated light. Holy Cross! A white light came from the sky like heavy rain. You dare! Jinrang was the angriest. Everything was a mess. They were all emerging clans, but the bastards that were too scared to approach Triton came scurrying over like rats at the chance. He always stayed calm no matter what the situation, but right now, he couldn't hold back his anger. That moment. Walk! the god Orion descended onto Jinrang's body. This place was near Poseidon's temple, and there was more freedom for a god to move from with less restriction due to the principle of causality. Orion could manifest through the channeling at Jinrang's desperate wishes. White holy power sparked from Jinrang's body. Constellations shined because they were in the dark night sky. That meant that he was stronger than most gods. Also, Orion was cherished by one of the higher gods of Olympus, Artemis. Jinrang roared and swung his sword around. True Tornado became even more powerful and broke into pieces above the heads of the invaders. It might have been hard and long to explain everything, but these were all events that happened in an instant. While 2 more of the 6 new stars had interfered, holy power sparked, and Bu showed himself. Time difference. In the slowed-down world, Yeon-woo looked at everything with cold eyes. Draconic eyes and extrasensory perception were calculating and guessing all routes. On top of this, something else was added. Time foresight. Click, clack. The pocket watch was activated. The time that was given to him was 5 seconds longer than what he had before. During that time, he saw many things. Also, he was careful. He had already confirmed that time foresight couldn't do everything in the fight with Bentik. There were no guarantees in a battle with a god. There would definitely be more futures that he couldn't calculate. So he checked closer, and he predicted the more accurate futures. Then, he grabbed it. Black aura exploded from the grid once again. The wave of fire spread through the complicated maze of skills. The pocket watch stopped. Time returned. Kwaong. The explosion covered the entire castle. Inside of it, only Yeon-woo was standing. Chapter 295 Poseidon, 7. Yeon-woo lifted his head and looked around. Magic power poured out of him and he suddenly became exhausted, but the Philosopher's Stone spun fiercely and supplied him with energy again. I missed a bit. The purpose of the foresight he read this time was to immobilize all the attacks and even get rid of those that he. The grid split through the flaws accurately, but unfortunately, it didn't reach the last point. The timings between time difference and time foresight didn't match up. Also, his opponents were hiding more skills than he expected. Well, I was able to check all the skills of the rookies, so it wasn't a complete waste. The players were all scattered from the explosion of the black aura. Each of their faces were filled with shock. Kreutz looked down at his hand. His outer skin had cracked, and his palm was a bloodied mess. His holy sword Zulfikar was shaking like it would break any second. Half of the holy power inside of it had evaporated from defending him. So this was the reason why the clan leader had said to bring him over in the most polite way possible. Kreutz nodded his head at his clan leader's insight. If they tried to force him like the 92nd Squad did? Not only would he have been in trouble, but even the illusion Knightage might have been in danger. He understood why Yeon-woo was considered the best of the 6 new stars despite being on the very lowest floor. A person like that definitely needed to be recruited into the fantasy regiment. Kreutz's hand throbbed as much as his head was throbbing from all the thinking, but he was glad that such a person was an ally. It was a relief that he had trusted Yeon-woo and pulled back his sword, which lessened his injury. Kreutz kneeled on a single knee and prayed, kissing the jewel in the center of the holy sword Zulfikar. Wishful prayer. Holy power activated again and wrapped around him. The injuries within him were healing at a quick pace. It was a prayer for his holy sword and Yeon-woo. While Kreutz was chanting the holy prayer, Dr. Doom vomited blood. He tried to swallow it down, but he had to suffer the penalty of the failure of using tens of magic spells at once. What is that? He clenched his teeth looking at the 2 eyes floating above Yeon-woo's head. It was a silent power that was pressuring his soul. Updat DFRM Novel B, I, N.C, O, M. To be exact, it wasn't the feeling of his soul being pressed down. All the magic and black magic he used were being sealed. He couldn't use his abilities like this. It was of utmost importance that he found a way to escape from that power. I'll push thee. Spells to later. With those words, Dr. Doom pulled out a scroll and tore it in half. He was covered in light and suddenly left. It was to rest to heal his injuries. Kikikook. How amusing. I'm very satisfied. I don't have to worry about what comes next. Faceless, who was furthest away, chuckled maniacally. On the outside, Faceless looked unaffected. The energy around Faceless was even more relaxed than Yeon-woo's, who had caused all this. Faceless had gotten involved to get rid of Bentik and Triton, but Faceless thought there wasn't a need for that anymore. Faceless thought Yeon-woo was enough to do the job. Of course, I'll have to aim for that guy after. The Hoarder. Faceless observed Yeon-woo through the bandages. Faceless had seen Yeon-woo once before being wrapped in bandages, but Yeon-woo was way stronger than before. If Yeon-woo continued at that rate, he would become a great nuisance. I'll remember you, Hoarder. Faceless spoke in the voice of a young woman and lightly kicked off the ground, disappearing as if weightless. Yeon-woo didn't chase after Faceless. He just looked at the complex flaws around Faceless. It's definitely just one person. But it looks like he's tied up with multiple people. Just what is Faceless' identity? Humans each had their own wavelength. It was because every one of them had a single soul. However, Faceless was different. There were multiple wavelengths coming off of them. Sometimes, it was 3. Other times, it suddenly exceeded 10, and sometimes, it shrunk down to 1. It was like hundreds of people were intricately combined inside a single body. That seemed to be the reason for the change in attitude and voice as well. Moreover, Faceless had been most affected. Before Yeon-woo exploded his black aura, Faceless quickly took back the bandages to wrap around their body. Then, Faceless moved to where the attack was the weakest and left the battlefield right after. Faceless' ability to read the battle was outstanding. It was hard even for Yeon-woo to follow. Faceless was at least an expert with a hidden ability or even something beyond that. Yeon-woo felt wary of Faceless, but he just shrugged it off and looked away. There, Jinrang was holding himself up with his sword. Blood was pooled up under him. S. The attack just now had the effect of chasing away Faceless and Dr. Doom, but what Yeon-woo had been aiming for was Jinrang. Jinrang felt the excruciating pain of half of Orion's power being blown away. He hadn't even been able to fight properly yet, but he had already fallen. The remaining holy power in his body was leaking, like a pot with a hole in it. The vessel had broken. The same went for Triton. Their entire headquarters were in ruins. Bentik still wasn't coming out even though the situation had come this far. Jinrang glared at Yeon-woo. Yeon-woo had come right in front of him. Jinrang didn't want to show a weak side of himself. He knew that one of them had to die for this to end, but he wanted to stand tall until the end, like Lana had before she died. Pug. Yeon-woo moved his left hand to Jinrang's neck. Jinrang's fiery eyes settled and his breath was stopped. Bathory's vampiric sword sucked up Orion's holy power. The proficiency of the skill Bathory's vampiric sword has increased 61.2%. Vitality is being absorbed. Magic power is being absorbed. Holy power is being absorbed. You have gained Orion's energy. The divine blessings are also automatically absorbed. The divine blessings inside of him amplified once more. Sir Jinrang! Get away from him! The players of Triton were furious, thinking that Yeon-woo was mocking the corpse of their superior. If Bentik was their father who led them, Jinrang was their mother who took care of everything else. Of course they would be furious. However, the players of Triton couldn't run at Yeon-woo. The illusion knightage blocked their path. Once again, another battle began. But before it even began, victory was already tiding over to the illusion knightage. Triton's players looked for Bentik desperately. Captain! Captain! Sir Bentik! Please! Please! Poseidon! Kreutz finished his prayer and got up. His armor was restored and shining again. I'll stop them myself. I hope you concentrate on finishing your fight with Bentik, Kane. Yeon-woo nodded and moved inside of the castle. 60% of the castle was blown away from just the explosion earlier, and it couldn't be called a castle anymore. However, the holy power at the center of the castle was heavier than before. That place is probably Poseidon's temple. Since Triton was an organization created from Poseidon's blessings and grace, of course there would have been a temple for Poseidon. Yeon-woo raised his foot and stomped down on the ground. Kwang! From his foot that was filled with magic power, the ground below him crumbled, and a pathway to the underground was created. When he jumped down, a large iron door greeted Yeon-woo. It's big. The iron door was huge. It was probably about 10 meters high, and it was thick, too. The holy paintings along the door were also very bright. It was an image of the 12 Olympians and other gods of Olympus battling the Titans. Each image squirmed like it was alive. If it was something he saw for the first time, Yeon-woo would have exclaimed in awe, but this picture was actually familiar to him. The door of the Olympus treasury. It was almost the same image he saw after collecting all 12 keys. It was slightly different in that in the image back then, Zeus with his lightning was the main figure, but here, Poseidon with his waves looked more emphasized. Beyond the door, something colossal and strong was moving. It was like Poseidon's holy power but also not. The threatening aura pressed Yeon-woo's shoulders down. It felt like it was forcing Yeon-woo to surrender and serve. An unidentifiable voice takes over your mind. You are falling into a stunned condition. You keep your rationality from the cold-blooded trait. The stunned condition has been released. The unidentifiable voice is chased away. You are released from the pressure. He had barely pushed it away using the cold-blooded trait, but something dangerous was still lurking around. He didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing, but he could feel Bentik's energy faintly inside, too. Did something happen to him? Yeon-woo held up his hand with hard eyes. Contrary to his worries that it wouldn't budge, the iron door slid open easily. It opened to a great dusty hall. Under the dome roof, holy paintings filled the walls and ceiling. They were all holy paintings related to Poseidon as he raised tornadoes and waves. In the center, Bentik was sitting at the altar. Bronze braziers next to him burned a blue fire, showing Bentik's thin exhausted face. So, you came. Kahalhalhal. I was right. You're a crazy bastard. Like me. Yeon-woo narrowed his eyes when he entered the hall. What happened to your arm? Oh, this. Bentik raised his right arm. It hadn't recovered for a while because Yeon-woo absorbed it, but it looked normal now. How is it? Isn't it awesome? But unlike his tone, his face was filled with annoyance. He unwrapped the bandages around his right arm. His right arm was shifting in the form of a blue wave. My damned God gave me this ridiculous gift saying that I'm too weak. It's such a ridiculous gift. A clump of holy power. Yet. That's right. An arm that Poseidon had given through channeling to use instead of Triana. However, the problem was that Bentik accepted it naively. It wasn't a normal holy artifact. Because of this damned clump, I can't move from here. There wasn't a name for the holy artifact. Poseidon had just sent a part of his holy power. Bentik didn't know that and just accepted the synchronization with Poseidon. After that, he had been continuing to fight for control over his body. Poseidon tried to steal Bentik's body. It was horrible for Bentik. He didn't even like how Poseidon descended sometimes, but completely taking over his body? Bentik couldn't allow that to happen. An apostle was the holy flesh and manifestation of a god, but they were still a separate being. However, Poseidon didn't accept Bentik's thoughts. You won't even catch him. Look at you now. How can you fight the king of the dead as a living being? It's impossible for you. You've just barely escaped for now, but you cannot expect the same to happen in the future. Come to me, Shadow. I'll lead your soul to the temple I rule and guarantee you to a high position. In the end, Bentik won the fight. There was a limit to Poseidon's powers as a result of the principle of causality. Still, Bentik was also hurt quite a bit. Half of his physical body had been consumed by holy power. Even now, holy power was trying to take over control of his body. If he wasn't concentrating even for a moment, it was the end. More than anything, it had taken too much time. Also, I'm completely bound here. With this damned arm being made of holy power, I can't leave the temple. Like how gods couldn't leave their temple of holy territory, Bentik was also bound here. The moment that he left, he would lose all his power or die. It was a damned curse. Kahulhalhul. A guard dog that protects the gates would be better than this. Bentik thought that Poseidon had been aiming for this from the beginning. It was to make him stay here because Yeon-woo was going to come soon. Because of that, Bentik lost many of his precious subordinates. Jinrang, Ted, Elaine. They all had different plans for the future, but they were still like family to him. He was furious at Poseidon. His religious followers were dying, but Poseidon didn't blink an eye. Was it because the lives of humans were like flies to a god? Because they were nothing in the face of immortality? What did you do for our god to hate you so much? Bentik cursed the power of the god he had carelessly accepted, thinking that he could become stronger. He hoped that Yeon-woo could cleanse him of this curse. It might have been karma for acting arrogant and confident while killing his own lover. Something. Yeon-woo replied slowly, and he aimed Vigrid at Bentik. As he activated the option, a powerful energy started to wrap around him. Before he kicked off the ground, Yeon-woo came to a realization why Poseidon didn't like him and even tried to kill him himself. It wasn't simply because he had spoken of killing a god. There was a greater issue than that. The Black King. Yeon-woo's eyes darkened. Poseidon is scared of me having the Black King's power. With those thoughts, Yeon-woo kicked off from the ground, leaving the ground cracked and crumbling. Kwang. Chapter 296 Poseidon, 8. Clang. Vigrid stopped right before Bentik's neck. His transparent right arm blocked Vigrid. Bentik had a hard face. Are you trying to catch me with just this much? Yeon-woo grinned. Of course not. At that moment, wings of fire grew from his back. The fire that soared up into the sky whirled heat waves around him. The Philosopher's Stone began to work furiously. Kwa kwa kwang. Yeon-woo pushed against Bentik using Vigrid without rest. Each time, black aura exploded and covered him in heat. The temple with holy paintings burned, and fissures began to appear on the walls. Yeon-woo and Bentik jumped above the ceiling that came crumbling down. Bentik chuckled. Even in that exhausted state, the sound of his laughter was loud. Kahulhalhul. This is it. Yet. This. He was overjoyed at that moment. He already knew his fate. After fighting to keep control over his body, there was no way he could defeat Yeon-woo. He could already tell that Yeon-woo was stronger than before. It had only been a few days, and not only had Yeon-woo recovered, but he had also found a new path for himself. A dragon. Only a dragon could have this damned potential and crazy talent. Bentik became more sure as he clashed with Yeon-woo. Even if he had his former strength, it would be hard to defeat Yeon-woo. No, even if he did, there was nothing he could do since he was bound to the temple. He was a warrior who considered dying in battle more honorable than being a watchdog that guarded the temple. However. But that doesn't mean I'll die easily. Bentik bared his teeth. Even if he knew he would lose, he wanted to play as much as he could before he was gone. He wanted to let the beast inside of him run freely for the last time. That's only fitting of the ruler king. Fighting was the drive of his existence. Bentik also released the holy power he had barely been holding back. Thanks to that, the synchronization with the spiritual power now took over half of his body, but he didn't care. Right now, he was planning on giving everything he had. That was also what Yeon-woo wanted. The reason he had come all this way was to finish their fight. Kwa kwa kwang. Yeon-woo clashed with Bentik again. Heat and water collided, and steam fogged up the air. The impact of the collision made the rest of the castle crumble. And above the ruins, Yeon-woo and Bentik were standing opposite of each other. Bentik looked at the sky as if he felt relieved. In a way, it looked like he was laughing at Poseidon. Kahulhalhul. People have to fight like this to feel like they're alive. Moments like these make me feel so happy. Being pent up in a room? Where's the fun in that? Just then, Triton's players who had been fighting Kreutz and the illusion Knightage brightened. See, Captain. Captain. Are you finally out? However, the players trailed off as their eyes widened. Bentik was about to greet them heartily, then laughed at his appearance. His spiritual body synchronization had reached his lower body. If he had been wearing something, it would have been mostly covered, but from the explosion, the clothes that he was wearing were ripped. He would now die if he left the temple. However, for the short while that he was releasing his holy power, he could live as Bentik. During that time, he couldn't show a weak side of himself to his subordinates. Why are you surprised, amateurs? Triton's players burst to attention at Bentik's shout. Is this the first time that we've been done over by those damned gods? But every time this happened, I stood up, fought, won, and took everything. Isn't that right? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Triton's players shouted out in unison. The fighting spirit that had died along with Jinrang and the others was revived. The faces of Kreutz and the illusion Knightage hardened. Who am I? Bentik. Who am I? The ruler king. Who am I? Our king. Bentik thumped his chest with his fist. It didn't make a clear sound because of the synchronization, but he still had a fiery heart. Then I'll ask again. Do kings lose or win? They win. That's correct. I am your king. I won't lose, so keep on watching. You will all be victorious after me. Triton's players roared again. The illusion Knightage gripped their swords harder. The atmosphere was different. Now, they would have to expect that Triton would fight back with all they had. If so. Bentik's eyes blazed. Run away. Until I find you, hide and grow stronger. That was the start. The players of Triton all whipped around and frantically began to run away. It was a sudden change of events. The illusion Knightage couldn't believe their eyes. Triton was known among the new emerging clans for being the strictest and having warriors who always fought to death. That was why the illusion Knightage had been tense during Bentik's speech. They thought Triton was going to fight back, but they were now running away? Did they have to chase after them? Or was it a trap? The illusion Knightage hesitated and looked back at Kreutz. Kreutz turned to look at Bentik with wide eyes, as if asking what he was thinking. However, Bentik's gaze on his fleeing subordinates was still intense. He stood as still as a statue, as if wanting to see all of his subordinates safely getting away. Chase after them. The illusion Knightage all whistled, putting their thumb and middle fingers inside their mouths to call for the flying dragons. Soon, wyverns came from the sky, and they got on top of them to chase after the escaping Triton. Yeon-woo clicked his tongue. Are you trying to save your subordinates? Bentik scoffed. Of course not. Do you think I would have those kinds of honorable thoughts? If I cherished my subordinates, I would have stepped up when they were being defeated by you on the River of Souls. Then. I don't want to show them I'm losing. What? Bentik grinned. I don't lose. No, I can't lose. In the minds of my subordinates, I'm always the ruler king, and I must be the victor. Only then can Triton and I remain that way in their hearts and heads as a mighty group. Lana died because she couldn't do that, and I did that so I would be immortal in their hearts. That's all I want. I don't have any plans to leave any regrets behind. Bentik was speaking about why Lana died. What they were after was different. He was saying that it was better to die by Yeon-woo's hand than to live pathetically as a loser. So he knows. Yeon-woo's eyes narrowed. It seemed that Bentik had seen when half of his mask was crushed at the River of Souls. Did he think that he was Jeong-woo? Or that they were identical brothers? Whatever he was thinking, Yeon-woo was ironically grateful that he hadn't told anyone. Or, maybe, as his brother had thought, Bentik might have thought of his brother as a friend. Then those words he was saying right now were atonement for back then. It doesn't matter. Yeon-woo spread his wings of fire apart again. There wasn't much time left for Bentik. He was going to see the end of this somehow. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Kwang. Kreutz paused while chasing after Triton on the flying dragons and looked back at the sudden sound. What is that? His eyes widened. Far away, columns of fire and water clashed against each other as they soared up into the sky. He could feel the heat all the way here. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Kwa kwa kwang. Pung. The column of water that soared up high into the sky crumbled, fizzing. The water evaporated into steam, and only bare land was revealed. It was already after the castle and cliffs of Triton had crashed into the oceans. Only the blue energy from above showed that this was Poseidon's holy territory. Yeon-woo and Bentik's fight below was brutal. It was a continuation of the battle at the River of Souls. Injuries appeared and disappeared on their bodies over and over again. There were burn scars faintly left behind. But just like in their previous battle, neither of them cared about being injured. Kukyakung. The longer the fight went on, the faster Bentik's spiritual body synchronization progressed. It was because as he released the holy power he had been holding in, it expanded faster. Bentik didn't look human as he fought with holy power. There was a new arm where his arm had been cut off, and even when he was injured critically, he recovered quickly and attacked. Bentik actually had the upper hand in terms of firepower. Yeon-woo was actually falling behind on the firepower. However, Caching. 13. The grid diligently slid across Bentik's neck. Normally, it would have been a serious injury that led to his jugular vein being cut, but the synchronized body quickly healed. Still, this was enough to shock Bentik. While Bentik was forced back, Yeon-woo quickly closed the distance between them and attacked him repetitively. Black auras shot out from him. 14, 15. Every time he counted, deep injuries appeared on Bentik's vital points and were healed again. If Bentik's body was a real one, the number that Yeon-woo was counting would have meant death. Bentik was definitely strong. And powerful. The vortex that he shot out with his spear was so destructive that you would probably be shredded if you came close to it. Yeon-woo also looked like he would be swept away, but he continued to avoid the vortexes and created a huge hole in Bentik's body. He had begun to see and understand more things after absorbing Poseidon's divine blessings. However, the problem was, it's not the same as before. It was the fact that Bentik's condition wasn't the greatest. What did it matter if his body was outstanding? His mind was exhausted. Bentik swung around his spear like he was releasing a beast, but it fell short of what he could do before. Especially his fighting spirit and tenacity. The fighting spirit that used to grip the battlefield couldn't be felt anymore. It was faint. Yeon-woo thought it was a shame. Kwang. Bentik's speed had increased, but it seemed slow to Yeon-woo. He could see through it with draconic eyes. It was plain to see. The spear separated again to create 6 vortexes. The sharply spun water came at him from all directions in whirlwinds. 6 combat. It was a skill earned by martial artists who had reached the pinnacle of spearmanship. Swoosh. Yeon-woo wrapped his wings of fire around him and circulated Vigrid. Black aura slid along the flaws and cut the whirlwinds. As fire and water collided, explosions rang out. Then, sweck. The tip of Vigrid landed in Bentik's chest, piercing through a heavy fog. Pug. Bentik laughed. A laugh of disbelief escaped his mouth after seeing the grid cut through his heart. He was flabbergasted seeing his body trying to recover even after his heart was pierced. His body was no longer his. But now, even this kind of healing didn't seem easy. From some time, something from the black aura was slowing his regeneration speed. Residual poison blood. A heavy, toxic air was spreading in the atmosphere. Kahaha. At first, when Poseidon said he could never win, he wanted to prove him wrong, but he felt like he knew why he had said that. He had almost died 19 times. Even if he was in his normal body, there was almost no chance he could have won. However, he didn't feel wronged. It was natural for the weak to be swallowed by the strong. Like he had swallowed Lana, he was going to be swallowed by a new strong opponent. Still, there was one thing he had that others didn't have. I didn't lose. Somewhere, his subordinates would be waiting for him, unbeknownst to his loss. There was only one thing that was a shame. I couldn't fight properly because of this damned god. Bentik's mind crumbled with that thought. His spiritual body instantly turned black. It was a sign that the residual poison blood had begun to take effect. Yeon-woo gripped the grid again to end the fight. Just when he was about to take Bentik's head, the air suddenly changed. The air that had been filled with fighting spirit and heat cooled down. A cold wind that felt like it was going to freeze Yeon-woo's skin spread around him. It was hard to breathe, like he was underwater. Bentik's eyes turned into a clear blue. Descent. The original owner of the body disappeared, and Poseidon, who was connected through channeling, swallowed Bentik's soul, and he was even trying to take over his body now. The body was now completely synchronized. Moreover, another ingredient for the descent was added on. Martyrdom. The blood of Jinrang and the others who died for Poseidon had become a kind of a sacrifice and pushed his descent forward. As long as he could achieve his end goal, he didn't care about using the deaths of his followers. He thought that the life of a mere mortal could be sacrificed any time for a god's will. We finally meet. Although he hadn't completed his descent yet, the environment shook with just his presence. It was a heavy holy power, equivalent to when Agar's had been trying to manifest. However, yet. Nice to meet you. And thanks for the present. Yeon-woo laughed with a relaxed attitude even in front of such a fierce holy power. What are you? Poseidon was about to finish his descent when Yeon-woo suddenly opened his left palm and moved it to where Vigrid was, in his heart. Swallow. Clack, clack. Bathory's vampiric sword dug into the spiritual body. Bathory's vampiric sword has been released. You are taking in more divine blessings. A new awakening is attempted. Demonic divine dragon body is being awakened 1, 3, 5, 7%. Chapter 297 Poseidon, 9. You. Poseidon belatedly realized what Yeon-woo was aiming for and frowned. Yeon-woo was trying to steal the rest of the divine blessings he had sent to the lower world. Since he had already taken some of his information with Bentik's right arm, it was easier to steal it. This was a body that was created purely of holy power. It had an advantage in that it made descending easier, but it was horribly weak to energy draining. And with the activation of Bathory's vampiric sword, the greatest of all energy draining skills, of course Poseidon ended up suffering the humiliation of losing his divine blessings. Let go. Poseidon gripped Yeon-woo's neck with his strong hand. He tried to stop Yeon-woo from breathing. Poseidon's descent was still continuing smoothly, and he could speak clearly now. However, it meant that he would be losing that many divine blessings. It wasn't easy to shake Yeon-woo off. No, rather, Yeon-woo pushed Vigrid in even deeper and forced in Bathory's vampiric sword. I said to let go. Current awakening progress, 12, 13, 15%. The more Poseidon resisted, the tighter Yeon-woo held on. I can't lose him here. Yeon-woo expected that Poseidon would interfere directly the moment he decided to storm Triton's base. Considering Poseidon's personality, he would never let go of his prey easily. Yeon-woo had planned to end the fight with Bentik before Poseidon interfered and take the divine blessing with Bathory's vampiric sword. Like he had done to Urd before, the damage to a god once their apostle died was great. He thought Poseidon would be greatly affected too. But Poseidon was trying to do something crazier than Yeon-woo had expected. Descent. Descending into an apostle's body was a form of a god coming down themselves. Of course, there would be limitations to an apostle's body because it was channeling the power of a god directly. That was why gods didn't try to descend unless it was of utmost importance. The vessel they had created could easily be broken. But if martyrdom was added to this, the story changed. Martyrdom was a type of offering. It traded the blood of followers for the power of gods in the lower world through the principles of causality. Poseidon attempted to descend after sacrificing his followers and even his apostle. Bentik's soul was probably gone because of Poseidon or absorbed into him. The way that each god and demon dealt with their apostles was different, but it was rare to see them act as extremely as Poseidon was doing. He was treating them like they were only for one-time use. No, Poseidon had actually cherished Bentik, enough to let him go even with all the harsh words that Bentik said about him. The fact that he was throwing him away like this confirmed what Yeon-woo had been thinking. Poseidon didn't want Yeon-woo to have the power of the Black King. Then I need to have it even more. Yeon-woo's draconic eyes lit up. Yaa. Let go. Poseidon was repeating the same thing from earlier. He was furious at Yeon-woo, who was sticking to him like a leech, not budging in the slightest. The problem was that as time went on, Yeon-woo's awakening continued, and it was becoming harder to force him off. Crunch, crunch. The formation of the cells took on a change. His bones also changed according to the newly written information. Current awakening progress, 25, 26, 30%. Quaquaque. Was it because of Poseidon's fury? The stage began to shake violently. The ground cracked, and the sea area along the cliff flipped over, a tornado high above them. Yeon-woo's expression hardened. The descent was happening faster than he was absorbing the divine blessings. At this rate, the descent would be faster and kick him away. That couldn't happen. The moment Poseidon's descent was complete, he would be in danger. Of course, it wouldn't be as bad as Agar's on the 23rd floor, but it was still dangerous to normal players. Then there's nothing I can do but slow it down. He wasn't going to depend on Bathory's vampiric sword to take care of things for him. The holy power has been opened. The divine blessings that had been coated with draconic and demonic blessings were released in bunches, and they could now show their power. Holy power symbolized the strength of gods, but the holy power Yeon-woo used didn't specifically have a name. Like everything else, it was just moving according to Yeon-woo's will. Yeon-woo focused his holy power on one spot at the gazes that always followed him annoyingly. The channeling is being strengthened. Yeon-woo didn't know about how to use holy power properly yet. He had never been an apostle, and he didn't have any plans to become one. His brother had also focused on growing his power as a dragon human and didn't take too much of an interest in holy power. Updat DFRM Novel B, I, N.C, O, M. If Yeon-woo wanted to use it well, he needed to practice more. However, there was no way he could do that now. Thankfully, there was a field that Yeon-woo was familiar with. Authorities. No, to be exact, it was the strengthening of the connection with gods and demons through authorities. The channeling with Athena has been strengthened. Athena nods warmly. Her will becomes one with yours. The authority stigmata of the goddess is being amplified to her grace. The channeling with Hermes has been strengthened. Hermes will becomes one with yours. His favor is furthered. The channeling with Azrael has been strengthened. Azrael's will becomes one with yours. The channeling with Handan has been strengthened. Handan's will becomes one with yours. As the connection with the gods and demons who had given Yeon-woo authorities became clearer, Yeon-woo could feel their presence right next to him. The limits of the authorities that came from him not being an apostle all disappeared. Each connected god used their channeling to approach. They had accepted Yeon-woo's wishes. Their wills became one. That meant that their will would descend to the lower floors according to what Yeon-woo wanted. It was a kind of descent. Yaa. You re-immortal, but you experience things that other players would never experience quite frequently. It's interesting. One man appeared in the smoke to the right of Yeon-woo. The mischievous smile on his lips showed that he was greatly amused by the situation. Hermes. Poseidon frowned, recognizing the man first. You dare interfere with my action? Gosh! Uncle, we need to set things straight. It's not me but you who's interfering with my business, isn't it? You know that I'm watching this child with great attention, and yet you're doing this. Hermes looked back at Poseidon and smiled faintly. He looked kind, but it was hard to tell what he was thinking because his eyes seemed emotionless. Poseidon became even more furious seeing Hermes like that. Are you being serious right now? You should know the best out of all of us what he is trying to touch. The power that Yeon-woo was trying to touch, death. It was a power that the gods and demons couldn't speak about lightly. Even those whose duties revolved around it. It was something that a mortal should never have. Hermes was one who could freely move from the heavenly world and the lower world. He would know well about the line between life and death. He should have known the best about the dangers, but I don't know. Hermes spoke coldly, his eyes still crinkled warmly. Hermes. Don't shout, uncle. I'm no longer the child who burst into tears when you got angry. You dare. Even you don't have the qualification to tell me to do this or that. You just go your way, and I'll go mine. Isn't that the duty of a god? Do you think it will go your way? I'm Poseidon. I know. Like you said, it probably won't end well. He smiled brightly again. It was a mocking smile. For you, uncle. As soon as Hermes finished, smoke gathered behind Yeon-woo and took the form of a woman. She was wearing a helm and shining silver armor. Half of her face was covered in shadows, but it was clear that she had a beautiful appearance. The goddess of war, Athena. She was famed for being merciless to her enemies, so she always caused fear and respect in players, but she was stroking Yeon-woo's palm with a sad face. She looked like she wanted to say something, but she didn't speak. And with intense eyes, she turned to Poseidon. A fighting spirit that didn't fall short of Poseidon's began to spread around them. It won't go your way, uncle. Poseidon clenched his teeth. Athena was someone who he was uncomfortable around even back at Olympus. She was his niece, but nothing good ever came of clashing with her. When she had taken over a city, his holy territory in the past, he completely turned his back on her. However, Athena had gotten in his way again. She knew all too well what kind of existence that pair was, but she was being moved by old affections. Poseidon's eyes that had been blazing with fury settled down. It was heavy, like the still water in the deep sea. You siblings dare try to play me. What would Zeus say if he saw? Nothing will change by speaking about the father we don't have. Fine. If this is your response to my action, let's see who is in the right. Storm rain. The authority that symbolized Poseidon activated. The ground shook violently, incomparable to what Bentik had formed before. Storm clouds spewed out lighting, and the sea combined with the winds. The stage growled fiercely like it was going to be flipped over. Still, Yeon-woo didn't move away from Poseidon. Endure it a bit more. I want to help you myself, but I cannot. However, this will be another trial that will lead you on your way. Like Heracles grew in the past, I believe you will too. Have strength, my child. Hermes put his hand on Yeon-woo's right shoulder. His holy power instantly multiplied, and Bathory's vampiric sword was revitalized. This was all he could do because it was an incomplete descent unlike Poseidon's complete one. However, this was still a great help to Yeon-woo. Athena stretched her hand out and pulled Yeon-woo's head closer to her. The stigmata of the goddess was strengthened, and the awakening rate increased. Current awakening progress, 46, 47, 48, 51%. Yeon-woo's body changed noticeably when the awakening went beyond the halfway point. His sparkling black scales became even clearer and started to shine like jewels. The wings of fire on his back grew larger. There were still gods and demons that hadn't arrived. An ashy smoke wrapped around Yeon-woo. It didn't take a fixed form, but it exuded the power that Hermes and Athena were letting off. It was the demon who always watched Yeon-woo silently, Handan. I still haven't received him as an apostle, so I can't let him be taken from a god stuck in the past. The storm clouds above divided and an angel slowly came down. He had a long scythe. There were 3 pairs of wings on his back, but they looked more cruel than holy. Azrael. The seraph who led deceased souls using his scythe revealed himself and blessed Yeon-woo. After Azrael, more blessings came. The gazes around Yeon-woo became clearer and more intense. All gods having death are one with you. All demons having death are one with you. There was no way Poseidon could stand against all those gods and demons despite his complete descent. You damned beings! Poseidon's influence, which had been about to fill the stage, was bound up instantly, and he shouted at the pain of his holy power being restrained. The more he resisted, the tighter he was bound. Bathory's vampiric sword growled louder. Current awakening progress, 69, 70, 84%. Aok. Just when Poseidon's spirit body was about to be stolen completely, a new demon arrived and announced his participation. A message has arrived from Agars. Message, what about me? Why aren't you calling for me? A message has arrived from Agars. Message, me too. Call for me. Tn, the term channeling will be capitalized to show that it's being used irregularly. We chose to continue with channeling instead of changing it to channel since the author seems to have created a new term for this novel. Chapter 298 Poseidon, 10. Yeon-woo debated whether he should accept Agars's descent. He still didn't hide his obsession for his brother, and he might be a bother to the rest of the beings here. However, Yeon-woo decided that it was fine to summon him. Agars was extremely wary of having Yeon-woo stolen from him, so he would probably try to take care of Poseidon, too. More than anything, Agars was already weak from being ripped apart by Hermes and Athena. He was also probably challenged quite a bit in El Infernal. There was no way to check, but his rank might have gone down as well. So even if he tried to pull a fast one, Yeon-woo didn't think it was possible for him to go against all these gods and demons. Still, Agars was one of the greatest demons who ruled over a plot of land so vast that he was called a duke. If such a being stepped forward, he would get rid of Poseidon for him. Yeon-woo opened a part of the demonic blessing so Agars could come down. Agars's gigantic consciousness came through the wide-open channeling. Yeon-woo was dazed for a second, but he quickly got himself together again. Even though Agars was injured, he still had a high level. Don't touch my stuff, you crazy old bastard! A black dot landed in the world of storms and began to spread like an ink blot, revealing a dark abyss. From it, Agars appeared with his fangs bared, his tens of pairs of black wings extended from his back. He didn't look at the other gods or demons with his red eyes. He only held Poseidon in his gaze. He didn't seem to care about Athena or Hermes, who had humiliated him in a previous battle. He didn't look like the demon who always paid his enemies back for what they did to him. Poseidon's face crumpled. He was already struggling from the beings that came now, but a great demon who was equal to him in terms of level had come. Agars, have you lost it? Shut up! Agars kicked off from the ground and ran at Poseidon. Unlike how the other gods and demons were supporting Yeon-woo, he was going to attack Poseidon directly. Poseidon tried to step back in surprise, but Bathory's vampiric sword, which was stuck in him, didn't allow him to. Quang! Agar's gripped Poseidon's neck instantly. Crunch! Poseidon's vertebrae began to be crushed. Demonic energy dominated over holy power. Poseidon's mouth opened wide to let out a silent scream. He wanted to push Agar's away, but he couldn't move. I've already repeated myself multiple times. That's mine. But you dared to ignore my words. Agar's growled with manic eyes, like he was going to pull Poseidon's head from his neck. His fangs flashed. I don't care about what kind of show Olympus performs. All of you fighting over family issues is none of my problem. But... Agar's extended his left hand to point at Yeon-woo. That's mine. Mine. Agar's shouted, drooling lunacy. Poseidon said something for the last time. Crazy bastard. Poseidon's head couldn't bear Agar's brute strength, and his head popped off into the air. The channeling was forced apart, and the holy power that filled the stage disappeared in the blink of an eye, and the head returned to Bentik. Bathory's vampiric sword absorbed all of the spiritual body. The divine blessings were accepted into his body. Current awakening progress, 91%. The demonic divine dragon body wasn't completely finished, but this was enough to change his physique extensively. Yeon-woo clenched his body as his soul was set up again. Draconic, demonic, and divine. The three blessings circulated inside of him. Pwahahaha. Agar's let out a crazed laugh after seeing Bentik's corpse. He whipped his head around with flashing eyes. Yet. I'm crazy. Crazy. Do you guys know how hard I worked to make that mine? Befitting a great demon who ruled over destruction and lunacy, Agar's didn't hide his enmity. He glanced over all the gods and demons. Everyone here, listen well. That's mine. So don't even look at it. Agar's glare paused on Hermes and Athena, who weren't moving away from Yeon-woo, and high in the sky at Azrael, who was looking down at them. It was a warning not to keep their hands off. Of course, the receivers of the gaze just scoffed. Then, Agar's looked down into Yeon-woo's eyes again. Especially you. Yeon-woo widened his eyes at the great pressure. He was already receiving a lot of pressure having summoned the gods and demons. If it wasn't for his cold-blooded trait, he would have crumbled from it already. You cannot die until I come back. You're mine, so know that you can't fall or lose until I come back. If you die, I'll follow you to the depths of hell and bring your soul back to swallow it. Understood. Yeon-woo narrowed his eyes and spoke in an annoyed voice. F off. With those words, he forced the channeling with Agar's closed. He took back the demonic blessing that he used. Agar's tried to say something, but he scattered without being able to let out a peep. Then, all the channelings along the sky closed. The channeling with Thanatos has ended. The channeling with King of the Seven Hells has ended. The channeling with Nergal has ended. As the presences of the gods and deaths of death became faint, they were left as mere gazes. Yeon-woo turned around. The channeling with the gods and demons he had received authorities from left later. The channeling with Handan has ended. Like always, Handan just disappeared silently without saying anything. Dang, he's always so quiet. Full W current nafloes on novelb.com. Hermes grinned as he watched Handan leave and stroked Yeon-woo's head. Then, he smiled toothily. You've worked hard. Thank you. For what? Hermes disappeared in the smoke. The channeling with Hermes has ended. Yeon-woo turned around to look at Athena again. Actually, he had received her help until now, but it was the first time he saw her himself. The goddess who always looked at him warmly and helped him. He thought that the aegis he received in the beginners section might have been a generous act from Athena. He had been glad to receive an epic item at the time, but thinking about it now, it was a reward that was too extravagant for the lower floors. Why was she taking care of him this much? Athena looked different from her fierce image he saw in Olympus's holy paintings and Poseidon's temple. Benevolence. That was the word that came to Yeon-woo's mind. Devote yourself, and devote yourself even more. Athena spoke in a grave voice. Then you'll be able to acquire everything you want. We'll always be behind you. What is the reason why you're helping me? Athena didn't say anything. There was only a faint smile on her face. It was a smile that looked sad for some reason. Is it because of the Black King? Athena didn't reply this time either. But with that, Yeon-woo was able to be sure that the Black King was tied to Olympus somehow. Just who is? That's all I can say. Athena cut off Yeon-woo's words. Devote yourself, and devote yourself again to reach where I am. Then, I'll tell you everything. As soon as she was done speaking, she vanished in the smoke. The channeling with Athena has ended. Go to where she is. Yeon-woo thought of where Athena's temple was. The 49th floor. It was where most of the temples of the gods of Olympus were. Did she mean that they could speak there? He couldn't tell if she was saying that she would tell him the Black King's identity or the reason why she was protecting him. Just then. Yuri wrong. A voice from above broke Yeon-woo's train of thought. Yeon-woo lifted his head. Azrael came down to Yeon-woo from the sky with his wings spread wide apart. They extended beyond 2 meters long. He is not someone to say things fixedly like that. Olympus? Malak? Ea? Bulls. They aren't beings who can talk about his meaning in their disordered state. How could they speak about such a conceptual being in that way? Azrael's eyes were blazing. Urg? The closer his presence approached Yeon-woo, the more the despair and grief of the Black King began to tremble. Do not misinterpret his meaning. Do not waste your fate by thinking over his meaning. It is something deep that you cannot cross or avoid, nor is it something that a mortal like you can observe. Azrael stroked Yeon-woo's chin. His lips were blood red. So accept it. He is death, and as his messenger, all you have to do is be faithful to him. Azrael was saying that everything he had was from the Black King. Accept it. Messenger of the Black King. Become my apostle and follow his meaning. That is your fate, and your destiny. Yeon-woo frowned. I refuse. He was someone who had refused the positions of apostles for countless gods and demons. Even if he was curious about the Black King, he wouldn't accept it naively. Considering how much it annoyed him, it might have been even worse than Agar's. That's a shame. Azrael grinned and disappeared. The channeling with Azrael has ended. All channelings have ended. When all the gods and demons had returned, the stage settled down quietly again. Yeon-woo's body toppled over, powerless. Pat. Just then, Shannon and Han Ryeong came out from the shadows and carefully held Yeon-woo. Sheesh, he's a tiring master. Shannon clicked his tongue. He was surprised watching the events unfold from within the shadow. He felt this every time, but there was probably no one who lived as interestingly as his master. Han Ryeong nodded heavily in agreement. Crunch, crunch. Yeon-woo's body continued to change, and he closed his eyes. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Shannon and Han Ryeong moved Yeon-woo somewhere quiet. Fortunately, there were many locations on the 30th floor stage to hide themselves because the floor was wide. Still, because someone would have followed them, Shannon and Han Ryeong were wary of their surroundings. Bu appeared at some point to draw a barrier around the cave Yeon-woo was in. While waiting for Yeon-woo to heal, the time on the stage paused. The clouds in the sky and the leaves waving in the wind all stopped like a lie. Only a dead silence descended upon them. Check-esh. Above Yeon-woo's head, who had been leaning on a wall, an ashy haze wavered and took Azrael's form. Azrael twisted his lips and looked down at Yeon-woo. A mortal who doesn't know his worth. Unlike what Yeon-woo had confirmed, the channeling with Azrael wasn't completely cut off. He had pretended to disappear while hiding a part of his consciousness inside the bracelet. It was something that Yeon-woo wouldn't normally have missed, but he didn't sense it because he was overwhelmed from the descents of all the gods and demons. I don't know why you are refusing your fate to be his messenger. I cannot understand. You are too foolish. No, I suppose those are the limits of mortals. While he was speaking, all kinds of emotions swept past Azrael's eyes. Envy, jealousy, joy, annoyance. They were all emotions towards what he had wanted so desperately but couldn't have. So as his servant, I will lead you down the right path. He was planning on forcing Yeon-woo to become his apostle. No matter how jealous he was, he had the duty as his servant to show Yeon-woo what it meant to be his messenger. The wrathful gazes of the other gods and demons followed him, but he ignored them with a scoff and slowly extended his hand towards Yeon-woo's head. His 3 pairs of wings flashed in their ashy color. At that moment, Yeon-woo's still head suddenly lifted. Azrael was surprised. He had definitely paused time on the floor. He had already expected the protests of the Bureau and the after effects from the principle of causality. But how was a mortal lifting his head, going against the will of a god? However, the moment he met Yeon-woo's eyes, Azrael realized that he was wrong. What he was looking at now wasn't Yeon-woo. It was a being who was wearing Yeon-woo's mask, not Yeon-woo. There was an ashy light in his eyes. The demonism had woken up. Are you going to interrupt my fun? It was a Flemish voice. It sounded like a beast, no, a monster was growling. The voice was horrendous enough to make Azrael, a higher god, shiver. Why, you are? Azrael shrieked, realizing what the monster wearing Yeon-woo's mask was. He had realized his impertinence. However, it was too late. Begone, bug! The demonism extended his hand and pushed Azrael. The blessing that allowed Azrael to be there began to fall apart. It wasn't just separating the holy power that allowed him to descend, but it was also taking apart his soul on the 98th floor. The angel of death, Azrael, met his sudden death. Then, Azrael's blessings whirled around to be absorbed into the grief of the Black King around Yeon-woo's left ankle. You have satisfied the conditions. The grief of the Black King has been unsealed. The demonism snorted, looking at the trembling sabotants. Humph! I guess your end was useful to us. With those words, the demonism fell back asleep, closing his eyes. Time began to flow again. Yeon-woo's surroundings were silent like nothing had happened. Chapter 299 Poseidon, 11. Hey! Yeon-woo's eyes shot open. He had been recovering, but the feeling that something was missing was so strong he had to open his eyes. He saw that one of his channelings were gone. The channeling with Azrael. When he opened the status window, he saw the third spirit was also gone. What happened? The third soul was actually the authority that Yeon-woo used the most. It was because it dealt with souls easily and helped strengthen his monster portents. Moreover, with Azrael's continued blessings, he was using it quite efficiently, but it had disappeared in the blink of an eye. He couldn't feel Azrael's gaze that was always on him either. Shannon! Hanryong! Yeon-woo frantically called for his spirit familiars guarding the cave. He didn't have any time to confirm the changes in his body of the 90% progressed demonic divine dragon body. Shannon and Hanryong appeared from the shadow on the floor. What's wrong, Master? Is something the matter? Yes, Master. Did something happen to me while I was sleeping? Like anyone coming by or something happening to my body? Of course not. We were protecting this place closely. We even checked you occasionally in case something happened to you. Hanryong nodded heavily in agreement. However, Yeon-woo's face turned stiffer as he listened to them. He lifted his head to look up at Rebecca, the spirit who had been protecting him. Rebecca shook her head, she was in her human form for the first time in a while. What happened? Azrael had put a lot of effort into making him his apostle. Considering his yearning for the Black King, he definitely wasn't a being who would have given up on him that easily. The problem was the reactions of the other gods and demons. Hermes comforts you, saying not to worry. Athena silently nods. Honden is quiet. Agars snorts, saying he knew it would happen. He chuckles, feeling refreshed. It was clear they knew something. And the reactions of the gods and demons of death after that were. Thanatos is silent. The king of seven hells is silent. Ksatagarba is silent. Ismatava shakes his head. Halfaz is silent. Something's definitely up. Yeon-woo's eyes darkened. Thinking he could see something, he scrolled through the messages and to check if there was anything he missed. A message that popped up when he was sleeping stood out. You have satisfied the conditions. The grief of the Black King has been unsealed. The conditions were satisfied. What did that mean? The secret of the fetter was suddenly released? Yeon-woo quickly checked the grief of the Black King around his left ankle. The despair of the Black King and grief of the Black King have been combined, and the cast of the Black King, 2/3, is being opened. Cast of the Black King. Category, Set. Rank. Summary, the past. We're always fearful of the great and mighty king who ruled over death and darkness. In the end, they betrayed him and locked him away in the darkness. The Black King trembled with rage during that immeasurable eternity. Thanks to that, the three objects that bound him became his servants. The grudge inside the objects will try to test the user because it is dark. Be careful not to be swallowed by it. The handcuffs represented the souls, the fetter, death, and the pillory, darkness. Asterisk soul collector. The user can collect the souls of those he kills. Then, the soul will become a ghost and lose all its powers. Only the deep grudges will be left behind. The collected souls cannot leave the collection. Depending on the proficiency of the user, the size of the collection can grow as well. Asterisk black evil. A form of strengthened black energy. It uses the bound souls and can change magic power into the darkness property. The user's properties will be strengthened as much as the number of souls that are used. The magic power used will buff the user and debuff the opponent. The random curses can be critical to the opponent. Asterisk second spirit. The souls bound to the collection always hate their owner. However, they are able to be freely controlled under the absolute power of the user. They steal the vitality of any living thing that comes their way, and not a single blade of grass is safe from their strength. Also, when the user would like, the souls can become an evil spirit, a monster portent, or even something beyond that. They will become the faithful followers of the user and carry out any orders they receive with joy. Asterisk summon of the dead. Using a part of the souls collected, the user can forcefully summon dead souls from the beyond. Depending on the level of the soul, the length of time they can stay and the number of souls that can be summoned differ, so the user must be careful. However, the summoned souls have free will, so there are limits to binding them. Asterisk. Not active. Sealed. This artifact is unique. There is only one in the tower, and it is completely bound to its owner. It cannot be shared or traded with anyone else. Some functions are sealed. You can only break the seal once you have certain qualifications. You cannot see part of the information. You can only see it once you satisfy the conditions. Currently collected set, 2/3. Despair, you can collect souls that are in despair. Grief, you can go against deaths filled with grief. It looked similar to before, but there were many minor changes. First, the soul collector. It was the same as the option before. However, when Yeon-woo looked at the collection, his eyes widened. The number of souls he could have was incomparable to the amount he could have in the past. 20,000. He had increased the size by raising the proficiency, but 5,000 was the limit. But this new change had more than doubled it. Could he even use all of them? If I can fill it up, a lot of things will be possible. It was something he realized recently, but the more souls he had, the better. They could be used in many ways. Changing them into black energy, barriers, buffs, and sometimes, just condensing them into a weapon was impactful. He realized this after earning the third spirit, but now, he could do more than that. Black Evil is the updated version of black energy. It was perfect to mix with black aura, like someone had prepared it just for Yeon-woo. If Black Evil was added on top of the fire property and activated random curses, it would be destructive beyond words. I'll be carrying around a great weapon. But what stood out to him was the next option. The second spirit. New Envel chapters are published on. It was obviously a stronger version of the third spirit. Frequently in legends, the skies were divided into 6 floors. The third floor was for humans, and the second floor was where gods punished the humans who disobeyed them. The second spirit allowed him to do everything the third spirit did and beyond. It even allowed him to increase levels. The souls, evil spirits, and monster portents. It said he could create beings that exceeded them. With this, I can evolve monster portents to a greater level than before. The reason why Yeon-woo fed them the residual poison blood was because they couldn't grow stronger, and he was attempting to give them another attacking method. But this new option said he could increase their levels. His current monster portents could easily defeat most players, so what kind of power would they have if their levels increased? He could also probably increase the limit of 30. Azrael suddenly disappeared, but instead, the seal was unlocked, and a more powerful authority was given. Logically, he was suspicious. There's no way Azrael would suddenly release the seal out of goodwill and disappear. The immortal gods and demons that Yeon-woo had observed so far were all selfish. He could see they were trying to build their reputation and become even more renowned. The same went for Azrael. There was no way he would have stepped back like that. It was easier to think that Azrael had taken back his power on purpose while Yeon-woo was sleeping. Did this item swallow Azrael? As Yeon-woo was continuing to make guesses. No way. He laughed at himself. An artifact that swallowed gods. There was no way something like that would exist. If it did, the tower would be flipped on its side. The gods and demons would never leave it alone. They took pride in the fact that they were invincible. Also, the Bureau wouldn't let it go either. No, the system wouldn't have allowed it in the first place. But Hermes is silent. Hell is silent. Nurgle is silent. The reactions of the gods and demons of death were a bit strange. Continued silence. They didn't show any reaction to Azrael's disappearance. No, it seemed like they didn't want to respond to it. A few of the gods and demons temporarily took their gazes off of him. What happened? He looked at the bracelet and Sabaton with wide eyes, but they just shook silently like always. They didn't answer any of Yeon-woo's questions. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The 98th floor. In the Temple of the Sea God, part of Olympus's holy territory, a furious shout came exploding out. None of Poseidon's servants dared to take a step inside Poseidon's holy land. They knew that quite a lot of time would be required for their king to calm down. No. No. Poseidon seemed exhausted. His lion mane hair was gone in chunks, and his wide stature was thinner. The black circles under his eyes showed how much holy power he lost. From Hermes, Athena, Hondan, Agars, Azrael, and the gods and demons of death. He had failed to descend because of them and had his apostle stolen. Because his holy power was forced away from him, even a mighty being like Poseidon was damaged greatly. Stupid fools! They're letting that go? How can they do that as immortals? Poseidon couldn't understand their decision. He could account for Hermes and Athena since they were the children of the foolish Zeus. Since they were still young and couldn't see, it was possible they had poor judgment. Hondan was always an evil demon whom he couldn't read, and Agars was a crazy bastard, so that could somewhat explain why. But what about the gods and demons of death? They knew where all their powers came from. Technically, the player named Cha Yeon-woo could be a danger to them. But they were taking his side and supporting him? It didn't make any sense. Or are they aiming for what comes after that? Whatever they were planning on, it wasn't acceptable for Poseidon. It was a mistake that they had committed in the past, and also his inheritance reminded them of their desire and greed in the past. With Zeus in a deep slumber and Hades missing, only he could step up to stop the player named Cha Yeon-woo. I must go look for my siblings. He clenched his teeth. Hera, Demeter, Hestia. He had to speak with his siblings who were still in Olympus. His eyes flashed darkly. It was proof that his holy power was slowly being polluted. Chapter 300 Poseidon, 12. Team, HH, Thursdays, Yahiko, 300, 0/12. Yeon-woo stopped looking at the bracelet and the sabaton. Of course, it wouldn't give him any answers no matter how much he looked at it. He had to look for the answer himself or leave it as a puzzle forever. Actually, that wasn't a bad idea either. It was convenient to borrow authorities, but there were also many discomforts that came with it. Because the channeling would be strengthened, it was easier to read his will and thoughts. It was extremely unpleasant for his thoughts to be revealed since his actions were already visible to them too. Also, Azrael was the worst. He could leave out Agar's, who was actually just simple without his obsessive nature, Hermes and Athena, who had goodwill towards him, and the silent Hondan. However, Azrael had always watched over him mysteriously. While he showed his greed occasionally, he would pretend to be caring sometimes. It was hard to guess what went on in his mind. Yeon-woo was always on edge because he didn't know what Azrael was going to do. Azrael was almost like the representative of the gods and demons of death. Such a being had suddenly disappeared, leaving him with an even greater authority. He had also unlocked the seal. It wasn't bad for Yeon-woo at all. Rather, he was grateful. He's the giving tree. Yeon-woo grinned and checked the last option. The other options had all been useful, but this was what popped out the most. Summon of the dead. It would use up a part of the souls in his collection and forcefully summon the souls that were resting in the beyond. You had to have met the soul while they were alive or have something related to them to summon them. The length of time was limited to the level of the souls consumed. However, the summoned souls would have free will. The dead souls are forcefully summoned. He wouldn't be able to make the souls do what he wanted, but many things would become possible. I can make a deal to learn skills or authorities. Or I can ask for advice. Yeon-woo used a part of the souls in his collection and gathered Black Evil to activate Summon of the Dead. Summon of the Dead has been activated. Who would you like to summon? Yeon-woo said the name that first came to mind. Bentik. Waik. A black whirlwind blew around him and scattered. You have failed the summoning. The person you are trying to summon cannot be found. As I thought. Yeon-woo narrowed his eyes. He had tried it on the off chance that it would work, but he couldn't summon him. So Bentik's soul couldn't move on to the beyond and was swallowed by Poseidon. Bentik had been crushed by Poseidon's forced descent. Yeon-woo had thought his soul may have been absorbed or destroyed, and it turned out he was correct. Also, he found a new condition for Summon of the Dead. I can't call for a soul that's not here or in the beyond. It was a tiny but important detail. All right. Now. Yeon-woo gathered Black Evil once more and activated the option. Who would you like to summon? Lana. Waik. This time, the message didn't show up. The black whirlwind took the form of a human. Long arms and legs were created, and a small head appeared. It was exactly like the image Yeon-woo had seen in the diary. Interesting. Shannon, who had been watching from next to him, exclaimed in amazement. Han Ryong nodded his head. They had seen shamans summon souls into their bodies for a short while, but it was their first time seeing souls as they had been when they were alive. It looked as if Yeon-woo had moved someone from the beyond to the living world. Who are you? Lana glared at Yeon-woo with a wary face. The aura around her was intense. It was probably the anger she still had towards her old lover. Instead of answering her, Yeon-woo slowly took off his mask. Click. Why, you? Lana's eyes widened. She walked heavily towards him and kneeled, stroking his face. Her hands were trembling. You were alive. You were alive. Tears were brimming in her eyes. Yes. So that's why I couldn't find you no matter how hard I tried. Ah, my precious child. My son. Lana was now stroking Yeon-woo's face with both her hands. She was grateful that she was seeing her disciple who she had only dreamed of meeting again. How scared you must have been. How lonely you must have felt. Lana's tears continued to fall as she touched Yeon-woo's face. Yeon-woo just stood still and didn't say anything. And after a while, Lana took her hands off of Yeon-woo's face. Then, she stepped back and sighed. She seemed to have moved past her grudges and regrets. Yuri. Not that child. Only after Lana got herself together did she really look at Yeon-woo. He had the same face, but he wasn't whom she was looking for. Yeon-woo nodded his head heavily and spoke. Hello. I'm Jeong-woo's older brother, Cha Yeon-woo. Lana covered her face with her hands. Tears dripped down again. However, the tears of her soul didn't reach the ground and scattered in the air. Then, she slowly lifted her hands. Her eyes were hard. So in the end, even now, the revenge is currently underway. Yeon-woo silently nodded. There's a lot to talk about. Lana crossed her legs. Do you have any alcohol? Asterisk asterisk asterisk. All people were curious about useless things sometimes. Yeon-woo was no exception. And today, one of them was resolved. Souls drink alcohol too. Like what his brother said about Lana being an alcoholic, she was drinking the wine that Yeon-woo pulled out from Intrinian by the bottle. He understood why his brother followed her around. Although, she spilled half of it on the ground. He didn't enjoy alcohol anyway, and he had only kept it in the subspace for Brahm and Galliard, so he didn't think it was a waste. A memory suddenly surfaced in his mind of Galliard saying it was expensive, but he just decided not to remember it. I can't get drunk in this condition. What a shame. Lana put the bottle down as she clicked her tongue. She could only feel the taste of the wine with the senses that were barely there, and she couldn't get drunk. Even if she couldn't get drunk, she wanted to feel like she could. Yeon-woo and Lana spoke for a long time. They were sharing stories about his brother. All those people threw you away, but there are still many people who long for you and cherish you. Yeon-woo thought it was a relief. Brahm, Galliard, and Lana. He was relieved that his brother's death and traces of his past weren't for nothing. There's not much time. I want to stay longer, though. Lana looked down at her fading hands. The time a spirit could be summoned wasn't set in stone. It was influenced by the level of the soul, but the will of the soul was important as well. If they wanted to return, the time of the summoning was shorter, or if they wanted to stay longer, they could stay as long as possible. It was now time for Lana to return. I'll call you again next time. I'll be grateful if you do. I was happy to breathe the air of the living world for the first time in a while. And I met the brother of my disciple. But use it carefully. If you use up all the times I can come here, I'll be bored after that too. Yes, ma'am. Understood. All right. I'll give you a present before I leave. Our God keeps on rushing me to give it to you. Lana grinned and held her hands out. Would you give me the necklace you have for a moment? Yeon-woo handed over the seawater charm around his neck. Lana accepted it and stroked it. It was like she was reminiscing about old times. The present that his brother had given to her on Teacher's Day. Then, the seawater charm flashed. The worn-out sections were restored, and it turned into a beautiful holy artifact. You have completed the sudden quest, Sito's resentment. You have accomplished something that is not easily achieved. Additional karma is being rewarded. You have earned 10,000 karma. You have earned an additional 15,000 karma. As a reward, you have earned Sito's holy artifact, Sea Water Charm, Sito's blessing, Sea King Chronicles, and Sito's authority, Sea King Stone. Take it. Yeon-woo took the Sea Water Charm Lana was holding and hung it around his neck. As he did, the holy power entered his body. The divine blessings began to move more actively than before. So long story short, I picked what you need the most. Since you have the divine blessings, you'll have to use holy power too. It won't be easy to use holy power without being an apostle. This holy artifact will help you from now on, so use it well. Thank you. There's also affinity for the water property and things like that, but you can check that later. The most important thing is that Sito likes you. She'll probably lend you power that is equivalent to an apostle's. Sito lost most of her power to Poseidon when Lana died. Yeon-woo had paid some of it back, so Sito probably regained some of her power. Of course she would cherish Yeon-woo. It was a good thing for Yeon-woo. With Azrael's spot empty, it was better to have the blessing of a god who had goodwill towards him than a scheming god. Yaa. Lana's body started to become clear. I guess it's almost over now. What a shame. I have things I want to eat and drink. Next time, I hope you call me in front of a feast. I will. Good. And be careful to look carefully around you. The tower is filled with evil people. Lana knew everything that Yeon-woo had done for his brother's revenge, but she didn't stop nagging him. She wanted to give him everything she could. She knew that Yeon-woo wasn't powerless, but she still felt worried and concerned. They had only met for a short while, but she felt close to him. I see why Jeong-woo said she was his teacher. And right before she disappeared, she asked in a weak voice that was unlike herself. Let me just ask you one more thing. Yes. How was Bentik's end? Was it longing for her lover, or was it resentment? He couldn't tell. When Lana got herself together, she could understand why Bentik had made those kinds of choices. She was half crazy back then. Yeon-woo couldn't forget the look in Bentik's eyes before Poseidon descended. There was exhaustion in his eyes, but there was also a spark that couldn't be extinguished. He didn't crumble at the pressure the god he served gave him. And in the end, he was laughing. Kahulhul. Yeon-woo remembered that strange laughter. It was a rambunctious and confident laugh. I see. He was like himself until the end. Unlike me. Lana chuckled and quietly disappeared. She looked like she had moved on from her last regrets and resentment. ******. A heavy silence fell. Yeon-woo rubbed the necklace Lana gave him for a while and pulled out the pocket watch. There was a faint JWCAH on the worn cover. Click. When he opened the cover, the hands of the clocks were trembling. No matter how much he learned about alchemy or magic, the pocket watch was still a puzzle he couldn't solve. How much longer will it take for me to get to where you reached? Muttering to himself, he blew black evil inside of the pocket watch. The condition of summon of the dead was to know the soul or have something from when they were alive. Here, he had his brother's item. And in his head, he had memories. Yeon-woo closed his eyes and activated the option. Summon of the dead has been activated. Who would you like to summon? Yeon-woo spoke in a trembling voice. Cha Jeong-woo.